Hi ladies, my name is Sam Barnard and I am from JoshGen City Bowl. I am looking forward to continuing our series on women of dignity. We are going to look at two women in the Bible together. Both women are very significant women. They each had a significant calling in God, and the choices that they made had a significant impact on not only their lives, but on your and my life today too. So let's do this. So the first woman that we're going to look at together is Eve. Eve being the first woman that walked the earth. She was created with a very specific mandate from God and a very specific purpose. In fact, in all creation, there was no one to fulfill the purpose that God had for Eve. Despite this clear and specific purpose that God had given her, Eve was tempted by the enemy. And we can find what that temptation was in Genesis 3 verse 6, where Eve says that the fruit on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil seemed good to eat as food, but also good for wisdom. So Eve wanted something that God had not given her. She wanted the knowledge and the power to decide what is good and what is evil. And that would mean that Eve would have the power to decide her own destiny and her own purpose, and ultimately to define her own worth outside of God, outside of God's plans and purposes for her life, and outside of God's wisdom and trust. And so we see that the thing that the enemy tempts Eve with and promises her is that she would be like God. She would be able to decide what is good and what is bad, and what is the purpose that God had created for her. And we see that as she takes this fruit, and the ramifications were not as she expected. The enemy had deceived her, and the very thing she wanted was the thing that she lost. The worth and the ability to define her own purpose is the thing that ultimately destroys her and births sin into the human race. So the second woman that we're going to look at together is Mary. Now Mary was a young Jewish girl who was soon to be married when the angel Gabriel appears to her and brings her a message of God's plan and purpose for her life. Now, although the angel says to Mary that she's highly favored by God, this message and purpose that God had chosen for Mary to be Jesus' mother had huge ramifications for Mary's life. It would cost her reputation, and it would also cost her any hopes or dreams that she had as a little girl. She would need to lay those down and ultimately lose her life to embrace the life that God had chosen for her. And her response is astoundingly beautiful. She says to the angel, "Be unto me according to God's will." She wants what God wants for her life, and she gives up, no matter what the cost of her life, she gives up her reputation, she gives up her hopes and her dreams in a beautiful trust and dependency, and ultimately saying, "God, my life is yours. Whatever you're wanting to do, I want for my life." And Mary could never have known the massive privilege and honor that she was stepping into at the time, just being a part of God's bigger picture and part of God's redemptive story for the human race. So there was a stage in my life where I had a particular idea of how my life would work out, and nothing has gone according to that plan. In my mind, I was going to finish school and go and study and work hard and get a degree and start a career and hopefully have a successful career. Both my parents had a number of degrees and at that stage had successful careers, and so that was what was important to me. And my life really didn't work out that way at all. I did a gap year with the church, and then I started studying my education degree. And then I met Dan, and not only did I madly fall in love with him, but I also sensed that there was something special in God and a purpose in God in us being married. And so we got married when I was 20, and at 22 I had our first child, Aaliyah, and a year later we stepped into leading a church in Benoni. And through all of this desire and dream to have a degree and a successful career moved to the backseat, or kind of off my planet at that stage. But there was a time where I was sad about it, and even just a sense of failure came upon me. And I spoke to Dan about it, and Dan encouraged me to go back to Jesus and ask him about it. And Jesus brought me to the story of Mary, and ultimately that is where we find our worth and our purpose and our sense of meaning, is in saying yes to whatever God has for our lives. And it might not be successful in the world's eyes, it might not be beautiful or meaningful in the world's eyes, but if it's what Jesus has chosen for our lives, then that is where our worth and our value and our sense of dignity is to be found. And the deception and the trap of the enemy is that if we seek our lives and our will, and if we want to be like Eve was, if the temptation is there for us to be the ones to define our own lives outside of God, the ones to define our worth and our purpose outside of God, and to want that power. When we seek to save our lives, we end up losing it, like Eve did. But when we seek to lose our lives at the feet of Jesus, we find the very thing that He not only made us for, but the thing that our heart desires in Him.